The last time I saw my husband, he was lying in that dark walnut casket, wearing the blue suit he always saved for weddings. I had picked it myself. I didn't know if he would have liked it, but after 41 years of marriage, I did the best I could. The funeral was quiet, stiff, and cold. Not because of the weather, though it was raining, but because of the people. No one looked at me, not even my own son. I sat 3 pews behind the family row. My daughter-in-law, Marlene, had made it clear when I arrived at the church that there wasn't room for me up front. "That space is reserved for immediate family," she said, loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. "I hope you understand." She didn't wait for my reply. She just turned away, heels clicking, clutching my grandson's hand like she owned the whole family. I didn't argue. I just sat down in the 3rd row, folded my hands, and kept my eyes on the back of my son's head. Brian didn't turn around once. The service was short. A few generic words from the pastor, a hymn or two, and that was it. My husband was lowered into the ground as if he were just a chore to finish before lunchtime. Nobody hugged me. Nobody cried on my shoulder. Brian and Marlene stood side by side, their arms linked, accepting condolences from neighbors and cousins I hadn't seen in years. I waited. I thought maybe, just maybe, my son would come over and say something. Anything. "Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing." He didn't. Instead, after the final prayer, Marlene leaned close to me. Her voice was low and sharp. "Now you can finally move to the nursing home, you old stinky woman. You won't be needing the house anymore." Then she smiled, straightened her dress, and walked away like nothing had happened. I sat there in silence, my hands trembling, my throat dry. I couldn't even cry. My husband had been buried, and my family buried me right after him. When I got home, the house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like something's wrong. I stood in the living room for a moment, still wearing my black dress and soaked shoes. His favorite chair was still by the window. His slippers were still under the ottoman. I hadn't touched anything. I took a deep breath and went to the bedroom. I just wanted to change clothes and lie down. But when I opened the top drawer of my nightstand, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A plain white envelope. No stamp, no name on the front, just sealed shut. I picked it up. On the back, in his handwriting, I saw 3 words, "Only for Elaine." My hands started shaking. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. His handwriting was faint, and the ink looked a little smudged, like he'd written it in a hurry. "Elaine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know you didn't expect this letter, but I need you to know something before they try to take everything." I saw what Brian and Marlene were planning. I saw how they talked to you when they thought I wasn't listening. I should have said something. I should have stopped them, but I didn't. "I'm sorry. What I could do, I did. I've left you something they don't know about. Look behind the spice rack in the kitchen. There's a folder taped to the back wall. It has the documents. You'll know what to do. I love you. I always did. I just didn't say it enough. Carl." I read the letter 4 times. Then I sat there holding it, not sure if I was about to cry or scream or both. The next morning, I woke up early. My body ached, not from age, but from the weight of everything I hadn't said the day before. I made myself a cup of coffee and walked straight to the kitchen. I pulled the spice rack off the wall. It was heavier than I remembered. I almost dropped it, and there it was, a yellow folder, duct taped to the back panel. I peeled it off carefully and opened it on the counter. Inside were copies of legal documents, property deeds, bank account information, and a letter from a lawyer named Richard Gaines. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the bold line at the top of the first page, "Trust agreement. Carl Edward Hart to Elaine Rose Hart." He had set up a private trust. Months ago, everything was in my name. The house, the second savings account I didn't even know existed, and a small cabin property in Wyoming that I had only heard him mention once in passing. Years ago, when we were still taking road trips together, I stood there, stunned, not because of what he had done, but because he had done it in secret, while pretending to smile at family dinners, while Brian and Marlene criticized my memory and mocked the way I folded towels. He had quietly made sure I would have a way out. And now I had to decide what to do. Brian called 2 days later. It was the first time he'd called me since the funeral. His voice was fake sweet. "Hi, Mom," he said, dragging the word like it was a burden. "Just wanted to check in. How are you feeling?" I didn't answer right away. "Look," he continued, "Marlene and I have been talking, and we think it's time to get serious about your future. We found a really nice assisted living place. Just until you get back on your feet, you know?" He didn't ask. He told. I looked at the letter again. Carl had known. He'd seen this coming. I kept my voice calm. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "Let me think about it." "Sure," Brian replied, "but don't take too long. We'll come by on Saturday to help pack." He hung up before I could say anything else. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of all the times I had put up with things in silence. The birthdays I was ignored. The holidays I cooked for them while Marlene complained I used too much salt. The way Brian stopped asking how I was and started asking what I had in my account. Carl had tried to fix what he could. Now it was up to me to use what he left. I took the documents and hid them in a new place, far from where anyone would think to look. Then I opened a fresh notebook and started writing down every step I needed to take. Lawyer, copies, address change, storage unit, plan A, plan B. By the time Saturday came, I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready, but they weren't, and they had no idea what was coming next. Saturday morning arrived with that quiet tension you feel before a storm. I had already moved the folder Carl left me into a locked file box I bought on Thursday. I didn't want to risk anything. The documents were now stored in the hallway closet, behind 3 boxes of old Christmas decorations. Nothing about me had ever been sneaky, until now. At 9:05 a.m., I heard the sound of Brian's car pulling up. Marlene's voice carried from the driveway before I even opened the door. "Let's be quick about it, Brian. I don't want to spend the whole day surrounded by mothballs." I didn't open the door right away. I waited, let them knock. 3 knocks, then silence. When I finally opened it, Brian gave me a forced smile and leaned in with an awkward side hug. Marlene didn't even bother pretending. "Good morning, Mom," Brian said, his tone overly cheerful. "Hope you got some rest." "Morning," I replied, keeping my hand on the door. "What's all this?" He motioned toward the driveway. "We brought boxes. We thought it might be easier to start organizing your things." "For the nursing home?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. Marlene stepped in before he could answer. "It's just a temporary solution, Elaine. Just until you're ready to let go of this house. It's too big for you now." I didn't move. "I'm not ready to go anywhere." Brian's jaw tightened, but he tried to stay calm. "We're not trying to pressure you. We just want to help you transition." I don't remember asking for a transition. There was a long pause. Brian looked at the floor. Marlene let out a short, exasperated breath. "Listen, Elaine," she said, stepping forward. "You've been through a lot. We understand. But keeping up this place? It's not practical anymore. Brian and I are trying to plan ahead, for you." "For me," I repeated. "Yes, and, to be honest, we've already talked to someone at Rosewood Village. They have a room available starting next week." "Next week?" I asked. Brian scratched his neck. "We put a deposit. It's refundable, if you're not ready yet." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then I stepped aside. "Come in. If you're going to treat me like I'm no longer part of this house, you might as well see how much of it still needs packing." They walked in like they owned the place. Brian headed to the hallway closet, the same one I'd used to hide the documents. But he stopped short when he saw the boxes stacked in front. "These are still here?" he asked. "Didn't we move these last winter?" "I left them there on purpose," I said. Marlene made a face. "This whole place is like a time capsule." She walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinets without asking. "Do you still use any of these old spices? Half of these are expired." I sat at the dining table, quietly watching. Brian opened the coat closet and pulled down a stack of photo albums. "We should start sorting through the old pictures, Mom. You can take a few with you to Rosewood, and the rest we'll keep safe." I don't remember saying I was moving to Rosewood. He looked up, confused. "You said you'd think about it." I did, and I have. I'm not going. Marlene walked back in, holding a stack of dish towels. "You're not going?" "That's what I said." Brian stood still. "Mom, we've already taken steps. The room is ready. They're expecting you. You can call them and let them know I won't be coming." His expression darkened. "We're just trying to help." "I know, but you're not helping. You're deciding, and that's not your place." Marlene rolled her eyes. "Elaine, please. You're not a child, but you're also not capable of maintaining this place alone. What if you fall? What if something happens? Then I'll deal with it. In my house." Brian sat down across from me. "You're being stubborn." "No, Brian. I'm being clear." We sat there in silence. I could feel the heat rising behind my ears, but I kept my voice steady. "I appreciate your concern," I continued, "but I'm not leaving this house. Not now. Not until I decide it's time." Brian glanced at Marlene. "We'll just go for today," he mumbled, defeated. Marlene didn't like that. "You know what, Elaine? I really hope you don't regret this. You're acting like you're fine, but you're not. You're old. You forget things. You move slow, and you can't even carry laundry upstairs without holding your breath." I stood up. Brian rose too. "Let's go, Marlene." She didn't argue. She grabbed her purse, but before walking out, she turned and added, "You're making things harder than they need to be." I didn't respond. After they left, I locked the door and leaned against it for a moment. My hands were shaking again, but but not from fear, from control. I had held my ground. For the first time in years, I said no, and meant it. That night, I called the lawyer listed in Carl's papers, Richard Gaines. He answered on the second ring. Gaines and Associates. This is Elaine Hart. My husband, Carl Hart, was your client. There was a pause. Yes, Mrs. Hart. I've been expecting your call. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I found the documents. Good, he said. We should meet. We scheduled for Monday morning. I didn't tell Brian. I didn't tell anyone. Sunday was quiet. I spent most of the day in my room going through my own boxes. Old letters, photographs, receipts, and the little things no one else would understand the value of. I made a separate pile. Things to take, things to leave behind, and things they'll never get their hands on. On Monday, I put on my best coat and took a cab to the law office. Mr. Gaines was a thin man in his 70s with a soft voice and kind eyes. He didn't ask many questions. The trust Carl left you is secure, he said. You're the sole beneficiary. He ensured it couldn't be contested without significant legal risk. Brian doesn't know. No one does. That was Carl's instruction. We went through the documents again. Mr. Gaines gave me copies of everything. If anyone tries to challenge this, just call me. But with what Carl set up, they'll have no ground to stand on. I exhaled for the first time in days. What do you want to do, Mrs. Hart? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I want time, I want space, and I want to make sure they can't touch a thing. He nodded. Then that's what we'll do. When I got home that afternoon, there was a message on the machine. Brian, Mom, listen, we didn't mean to upset you Saturday. Marlene feels bad. We just want what's best. Call me, okay? I didn't. Because what's best, for the first time, wasn't up to them. It was up to me. I didn't return Brian's call. Not on Monday. Not on Tuesday. By Wednesday, he started texting instead. Hey, Mom, everything okay? We were thinking about stopping by Saturday, just for a quick chat. I didn't reply. I read every word, but left each message unanswered. It wasn't about revenge. It was about space, and I finally had it. Thursday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared out the window for nearly an hour. I wasn't thinking about much, just sitting, breathing. That used to feel like a waste of time, but now it felt like claiming something I had lost. At 9 a.m., I took the folder Mr. Gaines had given me and locked it inside a fireproof safe I bought the day before. I placed it behind the linens in the bedroom closet. Just knowing it was there gave me peace. After lunch, I went through the drawers in the guest room. I found Marlene's handwriting on a notepad they had apparently left behind. A to-do list: sort old lady's meds, get her to sign, consent, paper call Rosewood, confirm Friday visit, cancel lawn service, save $. There was a scribble at the bottom in Brian's handwriting. Ask Mom about her checking account. I folded the paper slowly, put it in a Ziploc bag, and tucked it inside the same safe. They didn't even bother to hide it. That same day, I walked into the garage and looked around. It had been Carl's domain, mostly. Tools on the pegboard, bins of screws and nails, old fishing rods. I wasn't sentimental about most of it, but in the far corner, behind the water heater, there was a stack of dusty banker's boxes Carl used to keep files in. I pulled them out and spent the rest of the afternoon flipping through receipts, old correspondence, and insurance records. At the bottom of the third box, I found something unexpected: the deed to the cabin in Wyoming, and the key. Carl hadn't just bought the property, he had spent time there. The deed showed it had been in his name since 1991. I'd thought it was just some pipe dream he'd never followed through on. Turns out, he'd been paying taxes and maintenance fees for over 30 years. And now it was mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about the cabin, the way Carl used to talk about it when we were younger. One day, he used to say, when we're too tired of people, we'll just go where no one can find us. It stuck with me. By Friday, Brian's texts had turned short and cold. You're ignoring us now? This is not how adults handle things. Marlene said this is starting to feel hostile. I still didn't reply. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a moving company. I asked for an estimate to box up and store certain items, but not all, just the ones I wanted to keep. The man on the line said they could send someone Monday morning to do a walkthrough. I scheduled it under my name only. No mention of Brian, no mention of family. I was doing this alone. On Saturday morning, I was washing dishes when I heard the front door open. They didn't knock. Brian's voice echoed from the hallway. Mom? I dried my hands, walked into the living room, and met them halfway. Marlene was already peeking into the kitchen cabinets. What are you doing? I asked. Brian looked annoyed. You didn't answer. We thought something happened. So you just came in? You've never minded before. I mind now. Marlene turned toward me. Look, Elaine, I don't know what you're trying to prove by freezing us out, but it's not going to work. We're family. I stared at her for a long time. No, Marlene, you're my daughter-in-law. That's not the same thing. Brian stepped forward. Mom, please, we're trying to help you. We want to be involved in your transition. This is getting out of hand. What's out of hand, Brian? That I didn't move out like you expected? That I didn't roll over and let you and your wife run the show? Marlene crossed her arms. We're just thinking long term. You can't keep living like this. It's selfish. Selfish? Brian nodded. You're not being reasonable. This isn't safe. You're in denial. I kept my tone flat. Then call Rosewood. Tell them I won't be coming. Cancel whatever deposit you made. Marlene raised her voice slightly. You're going to end up alone in this house, and you're going to regret pushing away the only people trying to help you. I stepped aside. You can go now. Brian stood frozen. You don't mean that. Ida. He blinked. This is about Dad, isn't it? No, Brian, this is about me. Marlene gave one last glance around the room before grabbing her bag. We'll see how long you last. I didn't reply. I stood at the doorway as they left, then locked the door behind them. That night, I called Mr. Gaines and told him I was ready to begin transferring a portion of the funds into a separate account, one that Brian couldn't trace. He agreed to handle it quietly. Sunday came and went without a sound. On Monday morning, the moving estimator arrived. His name was Charlie. He was polite, called me ma'am without sounding condescending, and listened carefully when I explained what I wanted boxed. Only these rooms, I told him. The master bedroom, the office, and the dining room. The rest stays. He made notes, asked about insurance, and said they could do the job in 2 days. I scheduled them for the following Thursday. By Tuesday afternoon, I had already called a locksmith. I had the locks changed, front and back doors. On Wednesday, I visited my credit union and updated my mailing address for all bank communications to a private P.O. box. I didn't want anything going to the house anymore, just in case Brian still thought he could intercept mail. That evening, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, my phone rang again. Brian. I didn't answer. I watched it ring. Then I blocked the number. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want drama. But if they were going to force me into a corner, they needed to understand something very simple. I had already made my first move, and it wouldn't be my last. The moving truck arrived at exactly 9 a.m. On Thursday, just like Charlie had promised. 2 men came with him this time, one older, one younger, both polite. They didn't ask questions. That's what I appreciated most. I offered coffee. They declined and got straight to work. I had already sorted the rooms the way I wanted. The office files were labeled, taped, and ready. The bedroom had 4 boxes stacked neatly with the clothes I actually wore and 2 with the ones that still held memories, Carl's flannel shirts, the scarf he brought me from Santa Fe, and one dress I hadn't worn since the 80s but couldn't part with. The dining room was harder. That was the room where we used to gather. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Carl's retirement dinner. It was also where Marlene once told me to stop acting like the table was mine just because I said it. That memory helped me decide what stayed. I only packed 6 things from the dining room: the photo of Carl and I in front of the cabin in 1992, the silver cutlery set we bought with our wedding money, and 4 handmade placemats I had sewn years ago. The rest? I told Charlie's team to leave it. By noon, the movers had packed everything I requested. Charlie handed me a receipt and asked where to deliver the items. Storage for now, I said. I'll call you next week with the final address. He nodded without hesitation. Take your time. When they left, I stood in the living room for a moment. Half of it looked untouched, but the parts that mattered were empty now. The photo frames were gone, the bookshelves were bare, and the scent of lavender that usually lingered in the bedroom had disappeared with the linens. I wasn't sad. I was clear. At 3:45 p.m., as I was wiping down the kitchen counters, I heard a knock on the door. 2 sharp knocks, followed by silence. I checked the peephole. It was Brian. I didn't open it. Mom, he called out, his voice firm. I know you're in there. We saw the truck. Marlene said you were probably moving things. What's going on? I said nothing. Another knock. Are you selling the house? What's happening? Still nothing. Then his voice shifted, louder, impatient. You're being ridiculous. What are you hiding? Who told you to do this? I finally spoke through the door. Leave, Brian. You won't even talk to your own son now? You haven't acted like my son in a long time. That made him pause. When he spoke again, he lowered his voice. Mom, you're making this worse than it is. We just want to know what you're doing with the house. Is it about the will? Did Dad leave you something we didn't know about? There it was, the real reason. I'm not having this conversation on the porch. Then open the door. No, he scoffed. Fine, we'll come back tomorrow. No, Brian, you won't. I waited. Eventually, his footsteps faded. I didn't check if he left. I didn't care. The next morning, I went to the county recorder's office. With Mr. Gaines' help, we updated the property records. The house was already under my name solely, but we added a lien to protect it from any unauthorized claims. Mr. Gaines called it a safety net. I called it peace of mind. By Saturday, the text messages started again. What are you doing? Did Dad leave something for you that you're hiding? We should have been told. That's not how inheritance works. I didn't reply. Instead, I contacted a local real estate attorney. Her name was Rebecca. She was direct, efficient, and didn't waste time. I want to understand my legal position clearly, I told her. If I decide to sell, I want no interference. She reviewed everything. You're fine, she said. No one else has rights to this property or the assets in the trust. If anyone tries to challenge it, they'll lose. She slid her business card across the table. Call me the moment they try. The next day, I returned home and started preparing for the next step. I printed new address labels. I forwarded all remaining mail to the P.O. box. I put a sign near the mailbox. No visitors without appointment, just in case Brian got creative. On Tuesday, Brian tried to call from a different number. I picked up by accident. Mom, I didn't speak. I don't understand what's happening. 1 minute we're trying to help, and the next, you're freezing us out. You can't just disappear. You didn't think twice when you planned to put me away without asking. That's not fair. Neither is showing up with moving boxes and a nursing home contract behind my back. He stayed quiet. Look, he said, calmer now. We're family. We should talk about this. Maybe you're angry about something in Dad's will, and I get it. I didn't know he'd changed anything. I'm not angry, I said. I'm awake. Awake, yes, and I've made arrangements. He got nervous. What arrangements? Ones that don't involve you. You're overreacting, Mom. Let's just sit down. We'll have dinner. We'll talk this through. I hung up. No yelling, no drama. Just done. By Thursday, I had booked a 1-week trip to Wyoming. I needed to see the cabin myself. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I left the lights on a timer and asked my neighbor, Lorraine, to check the mailbox just in case. When the plane landed, the air felt different, crisper, less heavy. The town was small, quiet, and wrapped in pine trees and dust roads. I rented a car and followed the directions Carl had left in the folder. He had marked a simple map with red ink. Turn left after the second cattle sign. Look for mailbox 218. And there it was. A small wooden cabin with blue trim, surrounded by overgrown grass and an empty rocking chair on the porch. The door creaked when I opened it, but the inside was clean. Someone had kept it maintained. Probably a caretaker Carl had arranged quietly. There was even a note on the fridge from a man named Glenn, saying he came by once a month to check the pipes and roof. I sat on the porch that evening, staring at the field that stretched out behind the cabin. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't big, but it was mine. He had given me this, not to escape, but to begin. Back in the city, Brian probably thought I was having a breakdown. Let him, because what was really happening was simple. I was packing what mattered, and soon, I'd be gone. I stayed at the cabin for 3 nights. I could have stayed longer, but I didn't want to give Brian or Marlene any reason to start snooping. I wasn't running away. I was preparing, and to finish what I had started, I had to go back one last time and close things properly, on my terms. When I returned home Sunday night, the house felt hollow. Not because it was empty, but because I had already detached from it. It was no longer mine the way it had been before. It was a chapter, and I was already living the next page. First thing Monday morning, I called Rebecca, the real estate attorney. I told her I was ready to list the house, privately, quietly. No signs in the yard, no open houses. She understood completely. I'll contact a broker I trust, she said. Discreet, experienced with sensitive situations. By Wednesday, the listing was signed. The photos were taken while I stood just outside the frame of each room. I had insisted on keeping everything off public sites. Interested buyers would be vetted. No exposure, no gossip. That same afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail from Rosewood Village. Inside was a glossy brochure, a welcome letter with my name typed at the top, and a schedule of upcoming activities, bingo Thursdays, chair yoga, and something called Pet Therapy Mondays. There was also a note handwritten in blue ink. We look forward to meeting you soon, Mrs. Hart. Brian and Marlene spoke so highly of you. Your suite will be lovely. They really thought I'd go. I placed the letter in the same safe with everything else. At this point, it was getting full. That night, I got another call. This time it was Marlene. She didn't say hello. She started with, "You're being dramatic." "I'm being careful," I replied. "You're tearing this family apart. I think we both know that was already done. You're going to regret this." "No, Marlene. I think you are. Then I ended the call. On Friday, Brian called again. He sounded different, calmer, almost soft. "Mom, can we come over for dinner? Just to talk." I hesitated. "I'm not coming to fight," he added. "Just talk. I'll bring dessert." I agreed, not because I trusted him, but because I needed the closure. I needed to look them both in the eye before I left. I made a small dinner, just enough for 3, roast chicken, rice, and steamed carrots. Nothing fancy, nothing nostalgic. They arrived around 6:15 p.m., both dressed as if they were coming from church, too formal for a casual visit. Marlene carried a bakery box. Brian had a bottle of wine. I didn't drink. We sat down at the table. The tension was quiet but thick. "This looks nice, Mom," Brian said. "Thanks for making dinner." I nodded. Marlene unfolded her napkin like she was being polite on purpose. "So," she started, "how have things been?" I served the plates. Brian cleared his throat. "We know things got a little tense, and we may have overstepped." I stayed silent. He continued. "Marlene and I just want to understand what's happening. You've been distant. You've blocked our numbers. And then we hear from the bank that you moved your accounts." "You called my bank?" I asked. He paused. "I was just checking in. They didn't tell me anything." "That's because they're not supposed to," Marlene interrupted. "Elaine, this isn't an ambush. We just want to know if Dad left something behind, something we weren't told about." I put down my fork. Brian leaned forward. "Did he change his will? Was there another account? Because if there was, and it affects the estate, there is no we in this, Brian," I said. "Carl made decisions, and he made them privately." Marlene's eyes narrowed. "So there was something." I stood up slowly. "You both have asked me, in different ways, the same thing for weeks. You don't ask how I am. You ask what I have. You ask what I'm doing with the house. You ask what Dad left me. You never ask why." "Why?" Brian asked, confused. "Why he didn't tell you." No one spoke. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope. I placed it on the table in front of Brian. "What is this?" he asked. "You'll find out soon enough." Marlene reached for it, but I placed my hand on top. "Not yet." "You're selling the house, aren't you?" she asked. "Yes." Brian blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm done." "Done with what?" "With pretending I owe either of you anything." I walked to the hallway, took my coat and my bag, and returned to the table. "This dinner was never about reconciliation," I said. "It was a courtesy, the last one." Brian looked stunned. "You're not serious." "I am." Marlene folded her arms. "So you're just running off?" "I'm leaving." "There's a difference." I walked to the door, opened it, and stood waiting. "You're throwing away your family," Brian said. "You threw me away first." They left. That night, I cleaned the kitchen. I threw out the leftover food. I poured the wine down the drain. And I placed the envelope I had handed Brian back in the safe. I had never intended for them to open it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It wasn't about money. It was about control. And I wasn't handing it to them. By Monday morning, I had everything ready. The house was mostly empty, except for a few things I planned to donate later that week. The drawers were bare. The closets were open. The air in the house had lost the smell of people living in it. That made it easier. I sat at the kitchen table and made 2 final phone calls. One to Mr. Gaines, confirming the finalized sale contract, and the other to Rebecca, to sign the closing documents remotely. Both said the same thing: everything was in order. No issues. No surprises. Just as Carl intended. I left the envelope labeled for Brian on the dining room table. This one, unlike the decoy I'd shown them over dinner, was real. It contained nothing legal. Just a letter, short and plain. "Brian, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because you stopped seeing me as your mother. You and Marlene saw me as a burden, an obstacle, and eventually, a transaction. This was never about the house. It was about dignity, and you left me none. I've taken back what was mine. I don't owe you anything. Not an explanation, not forgiveness, and not a cent. If you want to know why, read the way you and your wife have spoken to me the last 3 years." Carl knew. He tried to fix what he could, and I'm doing the same now. "Mom, I didn't sign it with love. I signed it with clarity." At 10:40 a.m., a private moving van arrived and loaded the last few pieces I had chosen to bring with me. A wooden rocking chair, my favorite pillow, a box of photo albums, and 2 suitcases. I watched them work from the porch. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like cleanup. By noon, I was in a car headed to the airport. I had booked a one-way ticket to Wyoming, direct, no layovers. The cabin key was around my neck, tied to a string like a safety pin from childhood. I didn't carry much cash. Everything I needed was already arranged with the bank Mr. Gaines helped me open. That evening, I unlocked the door to the cabin for the second time. But this time, I walked in as its owner, not a visitor. I opened the windows. The breeze was cool. The trees outside rustled like they were breathing. There was no Wi-Fi, no television, no noise. I turned on the small lamp in the corner and watched it glow against the pine walls. The first night, I slept 12 hours straight. The second day, I called a local hardware store and ordered a few things: new locks, a fresh coat of paint, and a small generator. A handyman named Curtis came by in the afternoon to measure the windows. He didn't ask many questions. "You settling in for the season?" he asked. "For good," I replied. By Friday, the new owner of my old house had taken possession. Rebecca sent me an email confirming everything closed without issue. Brian wasn't notified until after it was final. I had made sure of that. I didn't hear from him until a week later. A voicemail came in while I was sitting by the fireplace, reading an old magazine I found in a drawer. "Mom, I saw the house was sold. You didn't even tell me. You just disappeared." Pause. "I don't know what you want from me, but if this is about money, you don't need to punish me. You didn't have to cut us out." Another pause. "I don't even know where you are." He sounded more lost than angry. Still, I didn't call back, because he did know. Deep down, he knew exactly where I had gone. Back to where I wasn't interrupted, questioned, or handled like glass. Back to where I could be myself again without being managed. 2 weeks passed, then 3. I started writing again. I made a grocery list for the first time in months without thinking about who would criticize it. I mailed a card to Lorraine, my old neighbor, thanking her for watching the mailbox. She was the only one I left a return address with. A month later, I got a letter forwarded from my old P.O. box. It was from Marlene. "Elaine, we heard about the sale. Brian is hurt. We thought you would at least keep us informed. This feels personal. It feels like rejection. You may not see it that way, but it does. You've made your decision, and I respect that. But Brian still hopes you'll reconsider. Family doesn't just end like this." Marlene, I didn't respond, because it hadn't ended. They ended it long before I walked away. They ended it every time they called me a burden. Every time they whispered behind my back about what to do with her. Every time they treated me like a problem instead of a person. This wasn't punishment, it was protection. And if that felt like rejection, it only meant they never saw what they were doing to begin with. Spring came late in Wyoming that year. The snow took its time melting. But when it did, the ground bloomed quietly, without announcement. And so did I. Not with a new beginning, but with a clean ending. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to understand. I only needed one thing: to be left alone, with what was already mine.